Nothing matters until you can get in the door, okay? I don't care if your presentation is better and more charismatic than Tony Robbins. If you cannot get in the door, it's all for nothing. So when you have this time spent on what it is that you're going to practice, you need to know everything we're talking about. It takes a long time to adapt and emulate and basically duplicate it. But some parts of the skill set that you need to learn are more important than others. It's just the way it is. And when we're talking about sales, specifically final expense face-to-face sales, you will get a lot more mileage, a ton, with practicing repetitively till you're bored to death, until your spouse drives you crazy after all the role-playing you did with him or her, on the appointment setting and the door-knocking process. The ability for you to be incredibly successful in this business, to me, predominantly depends on your ability to be good on the phone, setting that appointment, or good in front of the prospect at the door and getting into an appointment. So this is what matters most, ladies and gentlemen. If you take anything from this, you should be practicing this. You should be doing role-playing. You should have somebody critiquing or reviewing it. This is a big deal at the Ford Insurance Group. I want to hear this stuff because what happens is if you don't dial this in as perfect as possible as a new agent, nothing else matters. If you can't get in the door, you're not going to present or close a thing. Does it make sense, everybody? I hope it does. I want you really to understand how incredibly important this is. You've got to be good on the phone setting appointments, or you got to be, and really, good door knocking. So with that said, what we're going to be doing is actually pulling up the scripting now for the appointment setting. And we're going to be going over the script itself, what to say, how to say it, and then what objections that you're going to be experiencing. So, appointment setting. Let's talk about some big picture stuff here to begin first. Number one, with appointment setting. The most critical element of appointment setting is understanding the objective of what it is you're trying to accomplish. Why are you even picking up the phone to begin with? Why are you wanting to talk to somebody over the phone to begin with? Okay? If you don't understand why, then you'll have a hard time dealing with appointment setting. So one of the critical, foundational, fundamental things about appointment setting is this. You're setting an appointment to sell them the product. In other words, what we're not trying to do is set an appointment or sell them the product over the phone, then set them an appointment. So this is really important to understand. There's some people think, well, they got to know the details of a product before they can make a decision on buying or at least meeting with me. Now, I would say that's definitely true to buy, but the problem with the setup on the front end where you're trying to sell the product is that you don't understand the human psychology at play when it comes to setting an appointment. The objections that people have over the phone with setting an appointment aren't about the product in most cases. Sometimes I'm sure they are, but in most cases they're not. What the objections truly are about the concern of a stranger or a salesperson coming in their home, pressuring them to buy, taking their money, and the head trash that comes with dealing with the unknown. And so the more that you try to sell them on the product, the problem is you haven't earned the right to sell them. You haven't built rapport or trust or that kind of thing. And what happens is people's mindset isn't the same as it will be when you're in person with them after you've built sufficient rapport and trust with them. So the point here, guys, is very, very critical. If you're doing your script where you're trying to sell the client over the phone, so you are selling the appointment because that's where the underlying objection truly lies. So remember that as we go through this script and kind of walk through it and think through the details of it, okay? So as far as what to say, we're going to show you the script, and then I'm going to walk it back and kind of clarify the different elements of the script, and then hopefully give you some explanation why we do it this way. Kind of as a side note, as you guys know, if you've watched my content a lot, I'm a big believer in not just telling you what to do, but explaining why, because if you have the belief, therefore you have the conviction and the understanding, you probably are more likely to actually do the thing. So as this, as you'll see on the screen here, it has direct mail lead script, Facebook lead script, etc. So yes, you may be using another type of lead, but understand that's totally fine. Okay, and again, we'll do a Q&A segment. So if you have some kind of fine-tuning questions here at the end of this script discussion, then I'll definitely take the time to answer that. But let's actually look at the script in its entirety, and then we'll go break it down, and then we'll get to the objection handling part of the script. So here's how the script looks. Hey, Mrs. Jones, my name is David Duford, and I'm calling about the green postcard you sent off in the mail a few weeks ago requesting information on our new state-regulated final expense program. And the reason I'm calling, it's my job to deliver the information you requested, and wondered if you're free tomorrow at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. So that's what I would use if I was using a direct mail lead, okay? Now, if I scroll down a little bit more, you can see the Facebook lead script, and I'll rehearse it really quick. It's almost the same, but there's a few more modifications in here we'll explain in a minute. And here's the script. Hey, Mrs. Jones, my name is David Duford, and I'm calling about the information you requested on Facebook about our new state-regulated final expense programs. You said that your favorite hobby was fishing, and the reason I'm calling is it's my job to deliver the information you requested, and wondered if you're free tomorrow at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock. Okay, so the little modification there, so if you're using Facebook leads, most of your Facebook lead vendors out there should provide you some kind of like memory jogging variable. Most likely it's a favorite hobby, favorite color, that kind of thing. And with Facebook leads, as some of you have worked them before, they have a short shelf life. We'll talk more about leads in a little while. But with Facebook leads, they don't recall as often as, say, a direct mail lead would. So we want to remind them of something that they did that they can't deny, and lets them know that they actually did this thing. So that's why we reference the favorite hobby, okay? So this is the only script that you need to say to get into the door. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than this. Notice we haven't said really much about the specifics of this program. We haven't talked about it being whole life, never goes up in price, never canceled due to age or health. It's the greatest thing. We don't need to, because that turns people off at this stage more than it turns them on. So the first part is the opening, okay? So when the client says, hello, what do you say? Real easy. You say, hey, Mrs. Jones, or hey, Mrs. Prospect's last name. My name is David Duford. So this is the opening of the script. A couple of things here that I do and teach my agents currently that I think you guys should consider doing as well. First of all, if Mrs. Jones answers, I assume it's, or if a Mrs. Jones answers, I assume it's Mrs. Jones. Instead of asking, hey, is this Mrs. Jones? Why don't I say that? Because it sounds like I'm a telemarketer, okay? What I want to avoid with a lot of this is falling into the typical traps an amateur telemarketer will fall into, like asking, may I please speak to Mrs. Jones? Or is this Mrs. Jones? If you start to do that, then people will be put on guard because they don't know what to expect. They're admitting who they are, and they don't know who you are, okay? So what we presume to do is know that when a lady answers or a man answers, it's the Mr. or Mrs. that requested the information, and we just roll with it. Worst case scenario, it says, oh, that's my mom. Let me go grab her, and I'll tell her what it's about, okay? Continuing, I also say, my name is David Duford. I don't like to tell them I'm with an insurance company, okay? If I start to state that I'm with an insurance company this early on, then what I'm doing is like playing poker with my face cards up, right? Or my hand faced up. I'm letting them know really early on that I'm a salesperson. And that also instigates, it triggers them to, not want to listen to me because they think they know the deal. So we don't want to reference the company we're with. Not that we're trying to obfuscate or hide this stuff, guys. We're just, again, trying to play strategically through the script and reveal certain elements of what we're doing at specific times that give us the best leverage. So I find that if we say who we are or say a company we represent or whatever, it's more confusing than anything else. So I just don't do it because what I'm trying to get to after I introduce myself is to explain in stage 2 of the script why I'm calling, okay? I want them to know really quickly what the purpose and intent of my phone call is from the beginning. So it's pretty simple, right? I'm calling about the new green postcard you sent off in the mail a few weeks ago requesting information on our new state-regulated final expense program. Okay, so I'm trying to clarify with as little verbiage as possible what it is they did to prompt me originally to call them. So notice what I say here. I like to, with direct mail pieces, reference the color of the lead piece. Many of these lead pieces have different colors, pink, green, etc. So I'm calling about the green postcard you sent off in the mail a few weeks ago requesting information. Again, requesting information. We specifically say that because it's not as threatening as maybe, wanting a quote, right? Using the word quote is something that will trigger, again, the prospect thinking they're about to be sold. Requesting information on our new state-regulated final expense program. Notice what word is missing from that description. New state-regulated final expense program. I call this, we don't say the I word. You know what the I word is? Insurance. I picked this up a long time ago, driving as much as you do face-to-face, listening to a lot of radio. I would listen to sometimes these annuity shows that are on the radio. And what I noticed about especially one in particular in Chattanooga here that would play, has been on the radio for probably 15 years. Dude almost never says annuity. And I always found that interesting. At first I thought, well, you're trying to deceive, maybe not with malice or contempt, but you're trying to withhold that information. And to me, I thought, well, that's a bad thing. But then I realized that annuity, like insurance or life insurance, has this kind of preconceived notion. It immediately causes people to revolt, or not revolt, but revile, or just they don't want to engage once they hear that word. And they've got this idea of what annuity means, and it's typically negative. And if you start saying certain words too soon in a conversation without building rapport and trust, then what happens is people start to jump to conclusions prematurely and assume that you're out to take advantage of them. All of this is to say, this is why when I use a lead card or any sort of lead that we purchase, I don't recommend that you actually use a lead, or I should say in the script that the lead is life insurance. If you do that, you're short-circuiting the critical thinking functions of your prospect and putting yourself in this position to be now on the defensive. Because then they're going to say all sorts of things like, oh, I don't need any more. You don't need to sell me a policy, that kind of thing. So what we do, and this is not with the intent to deceive. It's with the intent to overcome inherent human reaction and behavior to certain things that we know will trigger a negative reaction prematurely. So what we do and what we teach is to describe what it is that we do without having to use the primary word. So we use more words to describe something that could be simplified, but doesn't carry that negativity and baggage that particular word is, like life insurance. So that's why we say our new state-regulated final expense program. That describes what it is that we're doing, but without saying the word insurance. So we kind of hopefully make them curious to see what this is about, but we totally avoid running into that obstacle early on that they feel like we're trying to sell them. Does that make sense, everybody? And I go through this explanation with you because I want you to understand a lot of people get hung up with not saying life insurance or saying state-regulated final expense like we're trying to deceive them. That is not the case at all, and hopefully this explanation helps you understand. All life insurance is state-regulated. Life insurance that takes care of funeral expenses is a final expense program. So that's why we say that. And if you say that language, it's going to trigger in the mind of the prospect, it sounds like something I'm interested in, without getting them defensive that we're trying to sell them life insurance. Hopefully that makes sense. So after that, then we go into the reason I'm calling. So now we explain how it's our job to deliver the information. We're now selling the appointment, okay? So remember how I talked about how we don't sell the product? Well, we have to sell the appointment, right? So we need to start a process to overcome objections that are occurring right on the spot. Sorry, guys, if you can't see that. Hopefully that's a little better. We're now overcoming the inherent objections most people have, because as I'm going through this, the sense in many of our prospects is that we might try to sell them something, okay? So they're going to start being defensive here if they haven't already. So what we're trying to do in the script is basically overcome the objection of the fear of a salesperson. All right. So this is why we sell the appointment. We're selling them on booking the appointment, in other words. So what do you say? Very simple. The reason I'm calling, it's my job to deliver the information you requested. And sometimes I'll throw in there, whatever you do with it's up to you. Kind of depends how I'm feeling. That's not wrong to say that. But at this point, I'm selling the point. I'm just my job. So I'm doing a job like you did before you retired. We all do things in our jobs we don't want to do. So hopefully there's kind of an intuitive understanding there. And I'm delivering information they requested. And I uppercase these words because I want you to emphasize them in the script. It's my job to deliver the information you requested. Okay? So I'm just delivering information that you requested. I'm not going to sell you a policy. Okay? And then the close here is the last part. It's very simple, guys. We need to close the appointment. And the thing with closing is there's a right way to close, a wrong way, and a better way to close, okay? The right way to close is just to ask some kind of question that it gets you in the door. Right? So the wrong way to close is not to close. Let me put it that way. A lot of people won't even ask this last point because they're so anxiety-ridden, that they're worried about the outcome. Now, some agents will say, hey, are you free tomorrow at 2 o'clock? Or can I come over at 2 o'clock tomorrow? The problem with that close, it is a close. It's an inferior close, though. Now, why is that the case? Because when you ask the client a question that has the option of both a yes or a no, can I come over at 2 tomorrow? What is the future client most likely going to say? No. If you give somebody an option to say no, they'll take it in a circumstance like this where they sense that they may be sold something. Okay, so how do you overcome this? Well, what's cool with you being in the sales business is that you have the frame of reference here in the sense that you can frame how the engagement to an extent is going to interact with your prospect. And so what we do and teach our agents, and what we're about to teach you, is that we close with what's called the alternative close strategy. So what we do is say, essentially, instead of can I come over at 2, and where there's a yes no option, we give them a yes option or a yes option and presume that we're going to get in the door. So the close looks something like this. Wondered if you're free tomorrow at 10 o'clock, or does 2 work better? Notice I said, do you want to say yes to 10 o'clock, or would you rather say yes to 2 o'clock? And when you frame your closing question in this fashion, it is incredibly powerful. There are all sorts of people that will let you in even if you have the most inferior close. There are all sorts of people that will never let you in no matter what it is that you say, with the best or the worst approach. But there's always this segment of the pie of prospects out there that we call on that may or may not meet with you depending on how they feel with your interaction and how they react. And this script captures more of that middle ground, that middle pie of the maybes. It never gets the no's, people who flat out will decline, and you'll always get people who still shut you down even with a great script. But it captures more of that maybe pool of prospects so that you can book and convert more of your leads into actual appointments. So again, bottom line here, make sure that you're closing with an alternate yes strategy. Would 10 o'clock work, or does 2 work better?